We're going to keep moving forward with what cell phones can do. So we finished up with this. The last live show was last Thursday. It was episode 119. We're on 120 right now. It's Warfighter Analytics using smartphones for health, WASH program from DARPA. And we looked at that, and we looked at BRIER, which is biometric recognition at distance, altitude and range, and then this idea of using total information awareness, creating this 3D environments, right, where they can use the same kind of technologies they use for video games and object modeling and rendering in three-dimensional space in a computer. They can apply those technologies to surveillance and other things. And that was the realistic core 3D environment. And this is all more or less piece by piece putting foundation down for how information is collected, what it's used for, what it could be used for, what the information types are, IARPA and DARPA programs that translate out in the commercial space, and through marketing. And it's really what a lot of it's really where money is at this point. Big data is the new currency. So for those of you that have missed the last few episodes, I encourage you to go back and look at them. This information compounds on itself. So jumping in is going to be interesting. I encourage you to pay attention, because we are going to look at remote determination of information, right, as to your emotional state, your physiologic state, using directed energy, things out of your cell phone. This was patented back in 1994. And what this patent talks about is security and interrogation techniques that don't require attachments to your body. Electromagnetic frequencies, ultrasound frequencies being projected at you, and then monitoring the reflections in order to understand things like heart rate, perspiration, respiration, pupil dilation, blood flow, pulse, arterial pressure, lie detection, emotional sentiment, happy, sad, stress, all of that. And that's really what a cell phone can do now. It does all of these things. A cell phone can emit light. A cell phone can measure light. A cell phone can emit other forms of electromagnetic radiation. It can measure other forms of electromagnetic radiation. Cell phones can emit sound waves, ultrasound, and others. They can detect sound waves, ultrasound, and others. So you're walking around with a very sophisticated sensor platform. TV equipped the same way. Laptop, computer, alarm system, camera system, they all have some versions of these types of things. So we're going to look at that a little bit. We may look at this patent from Google. It talks about their SOLE product, smartphone-based radar system for determining user intention in low power mode. And what I want to share with you for now with this is that something like a cell phone can emit different radar fields simultaneously and understand where you are, what your orientation is, what your physiology is. And this patent talks about the phone being able to understand whether or not you want to interact with the phone based on what you say, where you are, the speed at which you're moving, what you're doing with your body, what your physiology is. Are you focused on something that the phone needs to do or not? This patent talks about it. This patent also talks about beamforming, which really is concerning, because beamforming is not all bad, but beamforming provides the ability to project directed energy in a particular space and time. And the new Google SOLE has a chip on it, and that's what this picture here is depicting. Is this chip that's built into the phone that's able to emit wide transmit beams, which is this dome looking thing, just a basic example. This thing can direct that dome. It can shift it around into real space, three-dimensional space, in order to image at distance. And then it has narrow receive beams, so it can segment and break down the transmit beam and measure it in many different locations simultaneously to render three-dimensional understanding of space. This is done with millimeter wave technology. This patent talks about being able to use frequencies up to 400 gigahertz, which is, you're getting into terahertz-based imaging. And what I really want to drive home here is imaging doesn't mean you need a camera. Imaging means you need something that can measure a particular wavelength, a particular piece of the electromagnetic spectrum. So radar is imaging, just like a camera is imaging. Radar uses radio waves, millimeter waves, right? Terahertz waves to image. A camera uses electromagnetic waves in the light spectrum, but they still do the same thing. They image and sense and understand what's going on. We're going to look at invisible human emotion, being able to detect invisible human emotion using a camera. To look at the blood flow, the hemoglobin concentration, changes in the hemoglobin concentration by bouncing light or shining light onto your skin, and then using the blue, green, red, and or infrared receivers in a camera to understand the reflection of those rays of light that are bouncing off the skin or going through the skin, and some of it's absorbing in the blood, for example, in this pattern. Some of it's not. Some of it's being reflected back. And they can understand, looking at the blue channel versus the green channel versus the red channel, they can understand what's going on with the blood in your skin, the perfusion of blood in your skin. They can watch it flow. They can understand flushing. They can understand oxygen concentration. The amount of oxygen in the blood changes what wavelengths of light are absorbed or reflected, and they can measure all of these things in a very, very sophisticated way. This is not exclusive. There are many companies that can do this. We're going to look at a few. It's a patent for deception detection. So going back to lie detection, same technology. They're able to understand what's going on with your cognitive state to basically determine whether or not you're lying, or you're being deceitful, misleading. These things can be done using a camera. Imagine the power of knowing someone's true intentions, even though they might be saying something different. MIT, same thing. This is in 2011. Method and system for the measurement of physiological parameters. And here we are again looking at the red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel, which makes up a standard color camera. And being able to look and measure these independently, comparing and contrasting them against each other. What do you see from the red channel compared to the green channel, compared to the blue channel? In any combination, including the infrared, we'll get there too. And then be able to understand or derive inference. What's going on with your physiology? Heartbeat, respiration are common discussion items when you look in these patents. We're going to go over some of it. I'm going to give you a highlight up front here, just to kind of lay it all out. And then we'll go into detail. This patent's from Apple. We'll look at this one. Attention detection. Same thing, using a camera and using the laser-based systems that are now in most modern iPhones. Determining whether or not you're paying attention to your device. Same functions or same applications that would detect whether or not you're paying attention are also used to establish biometric security, which you can see here. So the very same systems that they're using for phone efficiency, for user operability to make the interface more seamless and more natural and more intuitive are the same systems that also support the biometric authentication, things like facial recognition, facial imaging with visible light as well as infrared. This patent talks about using a laser-based system to 3D map and cross-reference with a color camera to create high definition authenticating based systems, as well as to determine whether or not you're paying attention to the phone, to do things like manage the power efficiency in the phone. So we'll look at this patent a little bit, and it gets better. This is a camera array, lens array system from Apple, just one of their patents, multi-zone imaging sensor and lens array. And this thing talks about being able to apply filters to a single solid state set. They have camera sets that are double stacked and triple stacked, where one lens is able to filter and understand the red, the green, the blue, and the infrared, but do it in a more sophisticated way than a traditional camera. And what this patent talks about is using complex optics to create a whole image and have the whole image be filtered by the red, be filtered by the blue, be filtered by the green, or by the infrared, and actually recreating the images. And it's a way to create very, very high resolution imaging in a very, very small form factor, and do it and do it in a way that provides a great deal of context, great deal of information. And this particular patent talks about using all three, red, green, blue, and infrared, built into something you'd see on the back of your iPhone that's going to give you super duper high resolution photography. This is how these are the hardware components, examples, I should say, of the hardware components that are used to do things like gather all kinds of private information, intelligence, gather all kinds of intelligence. Integrated processor for three-dimensional mapping, Apple patent. And here's just basic. So this reminds me of an Xbox Kinect, but what this is really illustrating is this notion of having a projector and having a receiver, a camera receiver, to look at this stuff. And it's understanding movements, hand movements, facial movements, head movements, eyes, everything. They can project light at your breath and understand the gaseous content in your breath based on how the light absorbs and refracts. I'm talking infrared light. So the stuff is very, very, very sophisticated. Here's another one. What can be done? This is an Apple patent. Upper body skeleton extraction from depth maps, from three-dimensional depth mapping. They can understand your skeletal extraction. So here you are. You've got a projector. You just replace this with your iPhone, folks, or with a laptop or a tablet that's projecting light at you, infrared or otherwise, and have an open camera, and it can understand skeletal orientation. So it's a real life picture here, and you can see it's very, very grainy. I'm sure this is much, much better than what they're showing you here. It's a person sitting in a couch, and you can see the legs, the arms, and he's slouched and crouched back, and there's the head. And here's another view of it. There's an outline where they're just kind of giving you at a high level, very, very basic understanding and mapping in three-dimensional space. This patent was back in 2012, so you can imagine how much better the resolution is approximately 10 years later. And here's another example where they're able to start targeting, mapping, identifying anatomy in a very rudimentary way. So and then we're going to look at personal emotional profile generation. From this patent's from Effectiva, and this company was created as a spin-off of MIT project. And they use cameras and other physiological sensors that feed into AI neural engines and determine with high level of accuracy what your intentions are, what your emotions are, how you respond to feedback. And this is sold to marketing companies as a service. And these marketing companies then use this type of technology to sell products and services to the commercial space, the consumer space. And this is the way in which this information is able to be monetized. It's the way that this type of information is able to be collected, which then is a product or a service all in and of itself that now the government has the ability to access. The government didn't collect this information. This information was voluntarily provided to the government after potentially being monetized, all through consumers using products and services that have partnerships with organizations that do things like gather all types of information about you through your camera, through your microphone, through the sensing technologies that exist on your phone, directed energy based systems, whether they be light, as we understand visible light, infrared that we can't see, but we're starting to understand is there, something like Face ID, all the way down to the antennas and the speakers, which I already mentioned. But the antennas, if the antennas on your phone can receive a particular series of frequencies in the electromagnetic spectrum, then it's technically an imaging device. It's technically like a camera. It's just measuring electromagnetics in a different piece of the frequency spectrum. And we will get there as time goes on. Here's an interesting patent out of Russia, hardware and software package for telemetry of physiological and mental state of an employee or a patient, and a method for determining clinical signs impeding performance of work duties with remote interaction between medical personnel and employment or patient, employee and patient, excuse me. So this thing talks about using computer vision technology. So cameras, antennas, any form of sensing devices that are nearby to control the parameters of skin color change, mucous tissues in the areas of the face, surface temperature of the skin, composition of exhaled air, sensor motor reaction, motor activity, psycho-emotional and mental states, as well as clinical signs of alcohol and drug intoxication using combined lighting means to assess skin color and the perfusion of blood vessels in the face. Interesting. A method for determining clinical signs that impede the performance of functional duties of an employee or patient using telemetric technologies. So this is telemedicine, folks. In a world where it's too dangerous to go outside to travel and see a doctor, it can be done over the internet, perhaps in Zoom, where you can Zoom with your doctor. Tell the doctor all of your private HIPAA information through a platform owned by China, while taking all of your biometric measurements through things like your camera and your microphone, potentially your antennas. What a wonderful world we're building. Using software and hardware, they can look at and register the changes, which means you have a baseline in the color of your skin and mucous tissues, changes in the baseline of your mental activity, vegetative vascular reactions. We're talking about things that occur out of your control, things that the autonomic nervous system is able to regulate for you, that's outside of your conscious control. This falls in line with things like digestion, thermoregulation, which has to do with sweating, and vasodilation, dilation of veins. Has to do with pupil dilation, has to do with heart rate, has to do with your respiration, how many breaths you take. Are they shallow breaths or are they deep breaths? All of these things are somewhat regulated outside of your conscious control through your autonomic nervous system. Vegetative and vascular reactions. Disorders of motor sphere, assessment of data obtained, analyze and development for recommendations, blah, blah, blah. non-invasive determination of cardiac health and other functional states and trends for human physiological systems. This is from Google. This patent talks about having a smart mirror with a camera in it to look at you and look at your skin while you're in your bathroom so that it can determine whether or not you're in good health. Ultrasonic bathtub, where they can literally image your body and image your organs and image your skeletal system with ultrasound that's emitted through things like your bathtub. And there's a bath mat that you ground yourself on. It has electrodermal connections in the bath mat to measure the electrical activity in your body through your feet while you're standing on it. And this patent talks about having a toilet that uses a light to do things like measure your heart rate and your circulation while you're using the restroom. And welcome to the smart cities and the smart homes of tomorrow. Did I mention the mirror had a camera in it? I think I did. I just want to perhaps reinforce that. And what the relevance of this is this idea of sensors and convenience in the homes and the cities of tomorrow will be used to monitor and understand with such intimacy any human in the environmental space, to be able to distinguish and understand one human from another, one biological life form from another, and then potentially be able to collect, catalog, and collate all kinds of information about group dynamics, about individual dynamics, that all are able to be used for various purposes. Most importantly would be to understand how to extract money from you, be able to understand what makes you tick, what makes you happy, what makes you sad, and to monitor you to determine whether or not you are a threat to yourself, to your family, to your employer, to your government. Real-time sensing all the time, to do things like understand what's going on with you using your smartphone. Warfighter analytics, assessing soldiers with the smartphone, cameras, pedometers, light sensors, thermometers, fingerprint sensors, proximity sensors, accelerometers, microphones, gyroscopes. And this is how it will translate into real life. Being able to image and remove clothing and still understand body shape. This is all done with things like radar, available with a modern smartphone. Real-time biometric recording, information analytics, monitoring systems for behavioral health management. So this is another company, it's an interesting patent, that talks about using various sensors to understand biometric and physiologic parameters of an individual to diagnose, devise a treatment plan, and or monitor emotional and mental states of the individual. The method and system in this particular patent are designed to capture and process in real time clinical observations of patient responses and reactions in different clinical and patient settings and situations. So this is this, pick this to show you, to illustrate that they are rolling out, it's already been rolled out in my view, medical grade, what they would consider comparable to gold standard information collection for medical purposes. They're rolling out medical grade remote sensing analysis of people and humans through technology. And we're basically going to just look at cameras right now. Everybody understands a camera. Everybody understands facial recognition, and they understand the invasive nature of it. But it is far beyond them just oh, that's so-and-so. It's far beyond that. It's that so-and-so had a bad day yesterday, and the day before was pretty good. So so-and-so is doing all right now, but so-and-so generally, over the last 48 hours has had an elevated heart rate. Their blood pressure's up a little bit. they seem a little stressed out, they're a little dehydrated, they haven't slept a lot, and they're 80% inclined to drink 3 or 4 beers before the night's over, because they would know what your tendencies or proclivities are and what you would likely do or what you have done in the past under similar physiological experiences while you're having similar physiological experiences. Cognitive biometric systems to monitor emotions and stress. So this is a patent that talks about intentionally inducing stressors into the environment so that you can monitor the response, monitor the emotions and the physiologic responses to the stress that's been induced. Now imagine what targeted advertising can do. Imagine what tailoring a stream in Facebook, your special stream from Facebook or Twitter or anybody else, being able to strategically insert stimuli to gauge and monitor your emotional responses. What stressors do to you? How quickly do you recover from them? What is the intensity with which a particular stressor impacts or affects you? They have actual patents to poke and prod people to figure this crap out. So, and a company that's in the business of basically just trafficking your personal information, mobile personal services platform for providing feedback. This patent talks about using an audio sensor, video sensor, environmental sensors, biometric sensors, location sensors, activity detectors, health monitors, right, to be able to gather and aggregate metrics on groups of people and individuals, and then using the gathered information, right, to target and determine things like they say here, measurements of performance, generating feedback based on determined measurements of performance. So, AI as a self-help, that kind of a thing. And they have an example here of what this would look like, where you volunteer in and you have an app, and it understands everything about you or a lot about you, and then it provides you with basically counseling, provides you with feedback, gives you baselines and scores, health and fitness, your conversation, which priorities. Dana, you're 8% closer to your goal than 7 days ago. Great job. So this is personal assistants, digital personal assistants that use the sensor platform suite that is nearby, what's available through your cell phone, what's available through a smartwatch, what's available through your headphones, what's available through other devices that are connected to the device running the software, to collect information about you as fully and as completely as possible, to give you constructive feedback to make your life better. This stuff will be commercialized. It is commercialized. And it's the very same things that the intelligence agencies are interested in. And it's this corporate government partnership that makes it happen. And we pay for it. Corporations pay for it through the use of targeted advertising campaigns, targeted advertising information collection through big data analytics, where they can go to a company that partners with apps that are, that you download on your phone, who have access to all of this stuff, and they just soak it up in the metadata, and they get the information and the analytics. And just think about the accuracy with the ability for timestamping. How accurate can they timestamp things? And I'm sure that we would all agree that timestamping would at least be as good as down to the very same minute. So even if they masked your information, and they only use the metadata, they would know what device had this measurement at this time while this stimulus or this stimuli was being looked at on the device, this advertisement or this video or this whatever, this tweet. And even if they took away your name and what would be classified or identified as personal information, even if they took that away, they would still have a very accurate model of the user that was the primary user of that particular device. It wouldn't be too hard to infer who the user is when you start looking at the metadata. You could understand all the emotional piece all you want, and then just look at, what Wi-Fi address are they tied into between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. and you probably could infer the address or a nearby address of where that individual lives. What about where they work? What networks are they tied into? What cell tower are they logged into during the hours of 9 to 5? What Wi-Fi address are they logged into during the hours of 9 to 5? What Wi-Fi addresses or cell towers do they hop between the hours of 7 and 9? What do they do before they go to work? They drop the kids off? They go get coffee? What do they do right after work? So you get the idea. If the information can be collected, it will be collected and it will be collated and categorized. So now we're going to move into a little more specific information. This idea of directed energy, electromagnetics in the form of light, millimeter waves, radio waves, and ultrasound. We're gonna look at some excerpts out of this patent, and then we're just gonna take it step by step. So here we go. This was back in '96. Method and associated apparatus for remotely determining information as to a person's emotional state. So remotely determining information, right? Person's emotional state, looking at waveform energy, having a predetermined frequency. So you need to know if it's the red light wavelength, the green light wavelength, blue light wavelength, infrared, radio wave, millimeter wave. That's what they're referring to with predetermined frequencies and a predetermined intensity. So they can generate electromagnetic energy, project light, project infrared, project radio waves, millimeter waves in a known way, right? Wirelessly transmit it towards a remotely located subject, which means the stuff is not on or in your body. It's in a device, it's in something mounted on the wall, it's in the wall, which they talk about in this patent. We'll get there. Waveform energy is emitted from the subject and is detected and automatically analyzed to derive information relating to the individual's emotional state. Waveform energy is emitted from the subject. So, physiological or physical parameters of blood pressure, pulse rate, pupil size, respiration rate, perspiration level are measured and compared with reference values to provide information, utilizing and evaluating interviewees' responses or possibly criminal intent in security-sensitive areas. In many situations, to make decisions, it would be helpful to have objective information regarding a person's emotional state. Such information is useful in ascertaining the person's thoughts and intentions. For example, in an interview situation, objective information as to the interviewee's emotional state provides a better basis on which to judge the truthfulness of an interviewee's response to questions. Such information has been conventionally obtained in certain applications by so-called lie detectors. So accordingly, in this patent, what they're saying is it would be desirable to provide a means for objectively determining emotional state parameters without the knowledge of the subject. To understand your emotional experience without you being aware that you're being monitored. Such technology would be useful for medical purposes to determine, for example, whether a person is in danger of a life-threatening heart attack. Some of the physiological parameters which indicate emotional stress are also indicative of the physical stress of a heart condition. Such physiological parameters include blood pressure and pulse rate. An irregular pulse is especially indicative of cardiac arrhythmia, which may be a prelude to myocardial infarction, which is the medical term for a heart attack. Technology which serves to objectively identify emotional state without the knowledge of the subject is also useful in security applications, or intelligence, or in marketing, or in an interview process for an employer, or if you're being evaluated as a soldier in the military to determine if you're an extremist. It would be beneficial, for example, to detect an individual contemplating a robbery or a hijacking prior to the entry of that individual into a bank or an airplane. Folks, this technology has been patented since, in this case, 1996. Likely been around and used by the military for decades before this was actually patented. Yet the FBI, even after being given access to everybody's phone records in that geofencing location, are scouring social media looking for pictures of people to persecute. When in fact, all of the devices, all of the phones, all of the technology that was there that day, January 6th, could very easily, with the systems that DARPA and IARPA have created, that have been deployed through organizations and entities like Facebook, Twitter, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and others, would be able to determine someone's intent, what they were planning to do, how they were feeling in the moments on that particular day, in this particular example. And it wouldn't necessarily require somebody manually posting a picture on Twitter or Facebook or any other social media application. It would have been able to be monitored and managed, so to speak, without the individuals volunteering any information. And what we're being shown is the information that's being used is information that the public has voluntarily put up online, actually took the effort to make a post, to submit information to a corporation that is now providing that information to federal government. And what I'm attempting to illustrate for you here is things like your blood pressure and your pulse rate and your pupil dilation and how much you sweat and all of that can be evaluated and has been to some extent perfected with respect to being able to look at you through a camera or look at you in a radar field and understand all of these things about you. Why are we going through this charade that we're going through with respect to the FBI in this example, looking at people that have been posted online through platforms like Twitter and Facebook? I mean, it's not, if you're going after terrorists, that's what you're saying you're doing, you're looking for domestic extremism, you wouldn't be, why aren't you using this? Why wouldn't this technology be used? Especially if you've been given carte blanche access to everybody's cell phone records, knowing full well this information is being collected. It's just more of the same, in my view. We're being spoon-fed crap, and the real security apparatus, the real state apparatus, is functioning behind the scenes. Now, I'm willing to bet, I'm not saying this is true, but I'm willing to bet that the cell phone information that's potentially been pulled on everybody in Congress and everybody in the Capitol area, that type of information that we're looking at today, the physiologic-based stuff, chances are that's also available. And it has to do with trying to understand who's the extremists potentially in the government and the military and everybody who was there at the Capitol. And this is modern day Stasi level persecution, folks. It's just they're using different technologies to do the same thing. Rather than having people snitch on you, having your neighbor snitch on you. It's your cell phone. It's your little Imperial probe droid, little nanny minder device that not only manages you and measures you, but it measures everybody else around it. So in this particular pattern, looking at directed energy, light, electromagnetics, and sound being used without the interviewee or the person being observed, without their knowledge or potentially their consent, can be used in determining truthfulness or sincerity of that person during an interview. Can be used for checking the health of the person, detecting or detecting somebody contemplating a criminal act, implementing remotely without touching the subject, right? These types of technologies, the systems for obtaining information pertinent to a person's emotional state without the person's knowledge. So parameters that they can measure, respiration rate, amongst other things here. So physiological parameters taken, blood pressure, pulse rate, respiration rate, pupil size, perspiration, comparing these values with stored reference values, your own or others that happen to maybe occupy the same space. Think airport, bus station, train station, school, library, grocery store, mall, that kind of stuff. Databases for all of those areas. Looking at people's biometrics so that as people move to and fro in public spaces, they'll be able to pick up and identify people who are walking through there that happen to have an elevated heart rate or might be sweating more than normal when compared to everybody else in the area. Constant surveillance all the time. All the time. Check this out. Respiration rate may be determined by monitoring the differential remote absorption of the individual's exhaled gases. Invisible electromagnetic radiation from a source such as a light-emitting diode, a laser diode, is directed towards the subject's mouth. Then they can look at the polarization of the light and the change in the polarization of the light, in this case, infrared, and they would be able to understand the gas content in your exhalation, to be able to look at CO2 and other things in your breath using things like infrared light. In remotely monitoring a person's respiration rate, waveform energy may be modulated electromagnetic radiation or ultrasound or subsonic pressure waves, which is below human hearing. Ultrasound's above human hearing. Where the measuring waveform is electromagnetic, the measurement may be effectuated using the principles of differential backscatter absorption, backscatter technology, or interferometry to detect phase changes owing to a change in the position of the subject's surface, such as the chest wall. What does that mean? It means they can bounce electromagnetic energy off your body and they can pulse it at a fast enough rate to be able to measure your chest wall, the rise and fall as air is going in and out of your lungs. The wavelength or frequency of the modulated electromagnetic radiation is selected from the infrared and the near millimeter portions of the spectrum, so it can penetrate clothing material and be reflected from the underlying skin surface. Talk about measuring pulse rate using ultraviolet or infrared or near millimeter radio waves. You could still technically call those light, near millimeter ranges. Talks about using co-limited beams of radiation, which are focused, directed energy. It says right here, it can be generated and directed or aimed towards a predetermined point on the individual overlying on a blood vessel. The emitted or reflected energy is processed to determine intensity, or change in polarization or fluorescence of the emitted or reflected energy. And this allows them to understand what they call transdermal absorption. the absorption of light in various frequencies into the tissue, the absorption of light, various frequencies into the tissue, and then what's reflected back. So they know what they send out and they know what they get back, and then they can infer what's been absorbed and then determine why, and what else can be determined from that. Changes in transdermal absorption can be tracked to determine changes in the volume of blood and accordingly the pulse of the individual. They can detect surface moisture. Surface moisture is detected by measuring the intensity of radiation returning to a detector. So it sounds like, what, radiation and detectors and what are you talking about? All right. Radiation, electromagnetic radiation. Light is electromagnetic radiation. A detector of light is a camera. A detector of electromagnetic radiation in the radio range or the millimeter range is an antenna. So that's what they're talking about. Emitting electromagnetic radiation, light, infrared, radio waves, millimeter waves, and then having a detector that is appropriate to receive a particular frequency in the electromagnetic spectrum. A camera, as we understand it, receives light. Infrared detectors receive infrared. Antennas, as we understand them, receive radio waves and millimeter waves. So emitting radiation and detecting radiation. It's all radiation. And in this case, they're looking at selected points on the skin surface to measure moisture. Surface moisture is indicative of stress, as known by the galvanic skin response, the electrical measure which forms the basis for conventional lie detection. So check this out. Do you think technology is good enough where they can shine light at your skin and have it be just as good as measuring your electrical responses of your skin, just as good as a galvanic skin response detector, which is an electrode, a metal electrode that's placed on your skin to measure the electrical conductivity of the skin? Do you think that they can do that with light? I submit to you the answer is yes. Wouldn't be hard to do. Put a galvanic skin sensor on somebody, so a smartwatch, and you have the electrodes and you also have the light emitters on something like an Apple smartwatch. How hard would it be to take the galvanic skin response measurements with the electrodes that are on the watch, which is theoretically the gold standard for measuring something like an electrodermal response, a galvanic skin response, and at the same time, while you're taking those measurements with the electrode, shine the light in there so that you can do a comparison. So you know what the galvanic skin response is while an individual is going through their life. You're simultaneously taking measurements with the light. How long before you have enough data to just be able to use the light? How many people own smartwatches? How many people own a phone that can do Face ID, that you can log in with your face, where you have lasers that are in the infrared range that are able to monitor you? And I'll show you that. There's a whole section I do on infrared light and projected light and lasers. So where are we at? Almost an hour in. Looking at pupil size, they can count the different pixels in a camera. So they can measure your pupil, monitor your pupil, counting the different pixels of a camera corresponding to your pupil. In this case, measuring energy is electromagnetic energy in the infrared or near millimeter range. They can measure your blood pressure, and they say that blood pressure is indicative of emotional stress, right? Such emotional stress may be connected with provocation, criminal intent, or cardiovascular malfunction, where people are entering a bank or an airplane, for example, or being monitored. Blood pressure parameter must be correlated with other measured parameters, such as pulse rate, respiration rate, based on average ranges for those parameters, based on the age, size, and sex. All statistics, all data analytics. All right. I think we're going to move to another patent. You kind of get this idea. This is back in 1996. Now, what was previously embedded in walls in something like an airport to monitor terrorism has now been put into a form factor like a cell phone, where they can do the same level of monitoring inside your home. All right. So I think we're gonna move on. I don't want to read the rest of this. So we're going to leave this smartphone-based radar system for determining user intention alone, but I want to show you something here. These little beamformers, we're talking about directed energy, and we're talking about being able to understand specific pieces on a body and measure temperature and motion and all this stuff to determine, in this case, emotion and other physiologic functions. I want to show you what this thing can do. And from an antenna-based perspective, keep in mind, an antenna is simply just a receiver of a different series or set of wavelengths. Camera understands light. An antenna, in this case, understands millimeter waves. This patent talks about being able to generate thousands of narrow steered beams, for example, 2,000, 4,000, or 6,000 beams, such as the narrow receive beams, right, can efficiently monitor the external environment and accurately determine the arrival angles of reflections of electromagnetic energy in the environment. So using an antenna array, this radar system can form beams that are steered or unsteered, wide or narrow, or shaped in something like a hemisphere, a cube, a fan, a cone, or a cylinder. Three-dimensional shapes, projection radar fields, three-dimensionally projected radar fields that can be wide or narrow or in a particular shape, right? What we're seeing in the example in this pattern was a dome, right? It was just an unsteered omnidirectional radiation pattern. It says here it may be able to also produce a wide beam, such as a wide transmit beam. It says either of these enable the radar system to illuminate a large volume of space. So what they do is they transmit a beam, and then they use very, very narrow beams to measure what's going on with that electromagnetic radiation that they transmitted. And I just want you to know that they can sub this stuff down. They can create 6,000 beams with something like a Google Soli radar sensor. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous what they can do with this stuff. The picture I think I want to show you is right here. Yeah, this is a Google Soli radar chip, and this is what it is. And I mean, I'll show you here real quick. If you go to HUMANINTERNET.org, there's a whole section on Google Radar, and I'm going to add this one because it's very important. It's low power sensing. This is Google Soli. This is a little thing, right? And it radar-based biometric recognition. This is Google Soli patent. The whole patent just on biometric recognition. Radar-enabled sensor fusion, where this stuff ties into all the other sensors in your phone. Does it for power management. Ties into the camera, the microphone, all of it. Radar-based authentication, where they use your biometrics or unique physiologic attributes of a person. They can authenticate you with radar. So we're looking at cameras, but all of this stuff is done with radar too. It's easy to conceptualize with the camera because you understand the notion of a picture. You can see it. You can't really see radar. But everything that we're dealing with, it's done in the radar range, radio millimeter wave range as well. Radar-based gesture sensing and data transmission, where they can transmit data as well as understand gesture sensing and what you're doing in a radar field, all with the same components. And it goes on and on. Radar gesture sensing using existing data protocols. This patent talks about being able to use other devices around as radar fields. It doesn't even have to be the phone. Your phone can just be the primary controller to gather information from other antennas in the environment. Something from your Wi-Fi, something from your TV, something from your laptop, something from your security system. All of them, if they have antennas. This patent talks about being able to interface with all of those things and sub them as a radar field. They can generate electromagnetic waves that will be understood by the primary device, and they can be used to sense and understand the environment. This one talks about type agnostic RF signal representations. So it's a piggyback off the other one. It doesn't care. It doesn't care what radio frequency signals are emitted. It just has to understand what they are and why they're being emitted the way they are. And once they understand that, then they can allow the information that's supposed to go over the network, allow that to flow, and then they just change some critical or key components in what they call the preamble, the midamble, and the postamble. The data itself in a wireless packet of information doesn't change. They change the quality of service parameters that ensure the data goes from point A to point B successfully. They're able to modify those components, what they call the preamble, the midamble, and the postamble of a data packet. The data can flow, and they can manipulate the preamble, the midamble, and the postamble and use those pieces of information for the wireless data packet as radar. They can tell the system, they can tell the device how to transmit the radio frequency signals, still allowing data to pass, but in the process turning the wireless signal into a radar field or a contributing piece of equipment or a contributing component to the radar system itself. It's just another form of a camera, folks. That's all it really is. So we're going to move on, and we're going to look at the system and a method for detecting invisible human emotion. So they're looking at image capture-based systems, fancy for a camera, right? Or antennas. In this case, they're focusing on cameras, and a method for detecting invisible and genuine emotions felt by an individual. The system provides a remote and non-invasive approach to which to detect invisible emotion with high confidence. The system enables monitoring of hemoglobin concentrations by optical imaging and related detection systems. I pulled some highlights out of here. Humans have rich emotional lives. More than 90% of the time, we experience rich emotions internally, but our facial expressions remain neutral. These invisible emotions motivate most of our behavioral decisions. How to accurately reveal invisible emotions has been the focus of intense scientific research for over a century. Existing methods remain highly technical and/or expensive, making them only accessible for heavily funded medical and research purposes, but are not available for wide everyday usage, including practical applications such as for product testing or market analytics. This is the background. The following relates generally to emotion detection and more specifically an image capture-based system, camera, and a method for detecting invisible human emotional and specifically the invisible emotional state of an individual, captured in a series of images or video. The system provides a remote and non-invasive approach by which to detect an invisible emotional state with a high confidence. The sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems are responsive to emotion. It has been found that an individual's blood flow is controlled by the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, which is beyond the conscious control of the vast majority of individuals. Thus, an individual's internally experienced emotion can be readily detected by monitoring their blood flow. Internal emotion systems prepare humans to cope with different situations in the environment by adjusting the activations of the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems play different roles in emotion regulation, with the former regulating up fight or flight reactions, whereas the latter serves to regulate down the stress reactions. Basic emotions have distinct autonomic nervous system signatures. Blood flow in most parts of the face, such as eyelids, cheeks, and chin, is predominantly controlled by the sympathetic vasodilator neurons, whereas blood flowing in the nose and ears is mainly controlled by the sympathetic vasoconstrictor neurons. In contrast, the blood flow in the forehead region is innervated by both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic vasodilators. Thus, different internal emotional states have different spatial and temporal, space and time, activation patterns in the different parts of the face. They're looking at blood flow, where it's flowing, and what time it's flowing, based on where these vasodilator systems are for the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, looking at what they say here: your eyelids, your cheeks, your chin, your forehead, your nose, all over your face, knowing when they color, why they color, because of what neurons are located there, and then being able to take all that information, put it into machine learning, and understand your emotions, understand your intent. Different internal emotional states have different space and time activation patterns on different parts of the face. By obtaining hemoglobin data from the system, facial hemoglobin concentration changes in the various specific facial areas may be extracted. These multidimensional and dynamic arrays of data from an individual are then compared to computational models based on normative data to be discussed in more detail below. Because facial hemoglobin activities controlled by the autonomic nervous system are not readily subjected to conscious control, such activities provide an excellent window into an individual's genuine innermost emotions. It has been found that it's possible to isolate hemoglobin concentrations from raw images taken from traditional digital cameras and to correlate space and time changes in hemoglobin concentration to human emotion. Figure 2 in this pattern is a diagram illustrating the re-emission of light from the skin as it is shown. The light travels beneath the skin and re-emits after traveling through different tissues. The re-emitted light may then be captured by an optical camera. The dominant chromophores affecting the re-emitted light are melanin and hemoglobin. Since melanin and hemoglobin have different color signatures, it has been found that it is possible to obtain images mainly reflecting hemoglobin concentrations under the epidermis, as shown in Figure 3. What are they talking about? They're talking about this. This is Figure 2. They shine light, goes into the skin, absorbed into the skin, blue light, green light, red light gets reflected out. They are able to understand hemoglobin looking at the different layers of your skin and monitoring the blood flow in your skin. This is what they're looking at. Different colors. In this case, you could say this is red, green, and blue. Same picture, and they're looking at blood flow, looking at activation points in the face. Cheeks, nose, chin, lips, forehead, all of it. What else is in here? says here that different embodiments, right? So they talked about a digital camera, like a webcam or something on your phone. Other ways they can do this: optical sensors pointing or directly attached to the skin of any body or body parts, such as, for example, the wrist or the forehead, in the form of a wristwatch, wristband, a headband, clothing, footwear, glasses, steering wheel may all be used. From these body areas, the system may also extract dynamic hemoglobin changes associated with emotions while removing heartbeat artifacts and other artifacts such as motion and thermal interferences. In still further embodiments, the system may be installed in a robot, and their variables such as androids and humanoids that interact with humans to enable the robot to detect hemoglobin changes on the face or other body parts of the human whom the robots are interacting with. Thus, the robots equipped with transdermal optical imaging capacities read the human's invisible emotions and other hemoglobin changes related to activities to enhance machine-human interactions. The foregoing system and method may be applied to a plurality of fields, including marketing, advertising, and sales in particular, as positive emotions are generally associated with purchasing behavior and brand loyalty, whereas negative emotions are the opposite. In an embodiment, the system may collect videos of an individual while being exposed to a commercial advertisement using a given product or browsing in a retail environment. The video may then be analyzed in real time to provide live user feedback on a plurality of aspects of the product or advertisement. So it's okay if it's in marketing and advertising, but it's not okay if the government does it. I mean, what is fascism, folks? What's fascism? So embodiments, healthcare industry, medical doctors, dentists, psychologists, psychiatrists, etc. may use the system to understand real emotions felt by patients to enable better treatment and prescriptions. So there's this remote medicine where they're going to use software that uses the camera to be able to give the doctor additional information rather than them just trying to interpret it themselves, looking at you, processing the information themselves. They're going to use computer software instead. Homeland Security, as well as local police, currently use cameras as part of customs screening or other interrogation processes. The system may be used to identify individuals who form a threat to security or are being deceitful. In further embodiments, the system may be used to aid the interrogation of suspects or information gathering with respect to witnesses. Educators may also make use of this system to identify the real emotions of students felt with respect to the topics, ideas, and teaching methods. The system may have further applications by corporations and human resource departments. Corporations may use the system to monitor the stress and emotions of employees. Further, the system may be used to identify emotions felt by the individual being interviewed, while in their settings or other human resources processes. The system may be used to identify emotion, stress, and fatigue levels felt by employees in transport or a military setting. For example, a fatigued driver, pilot, captain, soldier, etc. may be identified as too fatigued to effectively continue with shift work. In addition to safety improvements that may be enacted by transportation industries, analytics informing scheduling may also be derived. Another aspect of the system may be used for dating applications. By understanding the emotions felt in response to a potential partner, the screening process used to present a given user with potential partners may be made more efficient. This system may also be used as a tool in effective neuroscience. For example, the system may couple with MRI, near-infrared spectroscopy, or EEG systems to measure not only the neural activities associated with the subject's emotions, but also the transdermal blood flow changes. Collected blood flow data may be used either to provide additional and validating information about a subject's emotional state, or to separate physiological signals generated by the cortical central nervous system and those generated by the autonomic nervous system. In still further embodiments, the system may detect invisible emotion that are elicited by sound, in addition to visions such as music, crying, etc. Invisible emotions that are elicited by other senses, including smell, scent, taste, as well as vestibular sensations, may also be detected. What does this mean? If a camera can see you while you're eating, if a camera can see you while you are smelling, while you're doing anything, then it potentially can understand your emotional response to whatever it is that you're doing. So it's just one company, Neurologic Corporation, to give you an idea of what's possible with this technology. Basic camera. Basic camera. That's everywhere. I mean, they're everywhere now. And it's all done with software. Same company, Neurologic Deception Detection System. This is similar to what we were looking at earlier, looking at 1996 patent, an apparatus for remotely determining information as to a person's emotional state. Same kind of thing. Deception detection with this Neurologic Corporation. MIT, method and a system for the measurement of physiologic parameters. The method includes capturing a sequence of images of a human face, identifying the location of the face in the frame of a video, sounds like face recognition, and establishing a region of interest in including the face. So a region of interest, the forehead, the cheeks, the eyes, the chin, the nose, the lips, just picking a point on the face. Pixels are separated in the region of interest in a frame to at least 2 channel values, which form raw traces. So 2 channel values, a red channel, green channel, blue channel, green channel, red channel, blue channel. The raw traces are decomposed into at least 2 independent source signals. And then they're saying at least one of the source signals is processed to obtain a physiologic parameter. So more of the same. We're going to breeze quickly through this, but just want to clearly illustrate for you that this is not exclusive to one company. This stuff it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Measuring physiological parameters, capturing a sequence of images of a human face, identifying the location of the face in a frame, looking at the particular pixels in a region of interest, and then separating it out red, green, or blue, or infrared, and then running it through machine learning. That's really what this is talking about. Processing steps include smoothing and filtering the separated source signals. In preferred embodiments, the physiological parameters include blood volume, pulse, cardiac interbeat interval, heart rate, respiration rate, heart variability rate. With the camera, it's preferred that the video be color video. The capturing step utilizes a digital camera, webcam, or mobile phone camera. In a preferred embodiment, the spatially averaging steps compute a spatial mean, median, or mode. The heart rate variability may be determined by power spectral density estimation. Simultaneous physiological measurements may be made of multiple users. So you and your bestie are in the same camera frame. They can measure both of your physiology at the same time. Talk about separating the red, green, and blue channels in a camera. Determining physiological parameters, including a camera for capturing video of a human face. What else is in here? The present invention thus provides a simple, low-cost method for measuring multiple physiological parameters using a basic webcam or other color digital video camera. A high degree of agreement were achieved between the measurements across all physiological parameters. The present invention has significant potential for advancing personal health care and telemedicine, courtesy of MIT. Now, before we get into Apple and the attention detection, or we're going to get into the commercial hardware pieces that do things like support biometric security, I want to point your attention to this personal emotional profile generation from Affectiva. And the reason is that Affectiva is a spin-off of MIT. And this company is an AI-based company. They are an emotional AI company. They are in the business of using AI to understand your emotions. So I want to share with you some of the things that this one patent of many from Effectiva can do. What can this thing do? What is it that they state they can do with their technology? It says here, individuals' emotions are an important component of who they are, right? We've been through this a little bit already, so I don't want to rehash it. Mental state of an individual can run a broad gamut from happiness to sadness, contentedness to worry, excited to calm. These mental states are experienced in response to everyday events, such as frustration during a traffic jam, boredom while standing in line, impatience while waiting for a cup of coffee. Individuals who are able to understand their emotional states have the option to use the information to accommodate their current abilities or limitations. Talking about being able to identify mental states such as frustration, confusion, disappointment, boredom, disgust, delight, and they can be identified and related to behavioral patterns. Right? When confronted with unpleasant mental states, individuals can respond with cravings for pleasure, comfort, reward, or enjoyment. And on and on and on. Analysis of mental state can be performed to develop a mental state profile for an individual or group of individuals. So now we're looking at the mental well-being of populations. Mental state profile of an individual or group of individuals. Mental states can include emotional states, cognitive states, and/or physiological states. Example of mental states include frustration, concentration, confusion, disappointment, hesitation, cognitive overload, focusing, engagement, attention, boredom, exploration, confidence, trust, delight, disgust, skepticism, doubt, satisfaction, excitement, laughter, calmness, stress, happiness, sadness, smiling, frowning, curiosity, and numerous others. Mental state profile information can be used to display patterns and norms for the individual or group and can aid in understanding consumer behavior, tailoring products to closer match a user's desires, and improving websites and interfaces to computer programs. A computer-implemented method for mental state analysis is disclosed, comprising obtaining mental state data from an individual, analyzing the mental state data to produce mental state information, and then correlating this information of an individual with other people, comparing and contrasting other people, and then putting people into categories. So beyond marketing, folks, if they can understand all of these things, what else are they doing with this? They understand your political affiliation. They understand your patriotism. They understand your everything. They understand everything about you. How you feel and respond to stimuli, period. So a personal emotional profile can be developed by evaluating facial expressions, staying in the spirit of cameras, the underlying theme for this show, hand gestures, and physiologic conditions exhibited by an individual, right? Personal emotional profile can be developed looking at all of these things: how you move, what you do with your face, and other physiological conditions like your respiration, your heartbeat, how much you sweat, your pupil dilation, all of it. The human's face, for example, is a powerful channel for communicating a wide variety of emotional states. Keep in mind, we just got done looking at a patent that looks beyond what you're doing with your face and is literally measuring the blood flow in the various parts of your face to determine these physiological parameters. So in this particular patent, they're just talking about your facial features. We've already looked at the blood flow that's beyond the facial features to understand your physiology. The general expressiveness of an individual as they view an input stimuli can be analyzed to determine the emotional state. A camera or another facial recognition device can be used to capture images of an individual's face. Software can then be used to extract and interpret laughs, smiles, frowns, and other facial expressions to aid in creating an emotional profile. So, they also talk about other physiological data can be useful in determining the person's emotional profile. Gestures, eye movement, sweating, electrodermal activity, which is that galvanic skin response we were looking at, that can be measured with light, by the way. Heart rate, blood pressure, respiration are a few examples of such potentially useful data sources. All of these things, folks, can be measured with your phone. With your phone. And this company is partnering with everybody. This company, Effectiva, is involved in global AI ethics committees that have the likes of Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and others on these global AI ethics committees. And this company, Effectiva, is part of that committee. They are an AI emotional-based software company. So they're not exclusive to cameras. They can take all this other sensor information and plug it into their algorithms and build very detailed composites of you looking at things that come from a variety of sensor types, which can capture your physiologic data, heart rate, blood pressure, electrical activity of your skin, of your muscles. A camera can be useful for simultaneously capturing physiological data and facial images. Sensors coupled to a computer in some embodiments, blah, blah, blah. What else is in here? I know we're beating cameras to death, but it's everybody understands a camera, so we've got to do it in order to get into radar, in order to get into invisible light like infrared. We've got to go through cameras. Personal emotional profile information can be used to create a summary based upon the analysis of an individual's mental state. A summary can include a user's personal emotional state, category for an emotional profile, demographic, or other statistical information. Criteria such as perceptions, sensations, dreams, and daydreams, moments of despair, boredom, flashes of inspiration, recollection, images seen in the mind's eye, thoughts, and many others. This summary can be compared to and correlated with the summary emotional profile information from other individuals in order to include the individual in a previously defined category. So they want to know everything about you and how you respond to everything. Images seen in the mind's eye, your thoughts, flashes of inspiration, recollections. Monitoring your personal emotional profile. The profile can comprise an emotographic profile. The emotographic profile can include emotional data, statistics, categories of emotions that can be used to characterize, label, or type an individual or plurality of individuals. The emotographic profile of an individual can include information about the individual's adherence or deviation from the norms of many individuals. So are you going with the flow or are you against the grain? The emotographic profile of an individual can include a category of similarly situated individuals. The profile can also include demographic information. Additional personal emotional profile information can also be used to further define or augment demographic information of an individual or many individuals. These demographic characteristics used to classify an individual or group can include any demographic, including but not limited to age, sex, marital status, literacy, education, employment status, occupation, geographic location, place of birth, language, religion, nationality, ethnicity, race, and citizenship. In some embodiments, individuals who comprise a group defined by one or more demographic attributes, such as those listed above, will experience generally similar emotional responses to an event. A normal emotional response to a given event can be inferred based upon the aggregate response to an event or life circumstance from many of the members of certain demographic groups. In embodiments, demographic information is combined with emotographic profile information to categorize, label, or type an individual or a plurality of individuals. So if you think that there exists an ability to micro-target people and provide targeted stimuli through micro-targeting of individuals, this is how it's done. Complete soaking of all of your emotional responses to as many environmental stimuli as possible, building a profile, your emotional profile, and then figuring out how to steer and selectively apply stimuli to take you on an emotional roller coaster, an emotional ride. The mental state data can be collected on a mobile device such as a cell phone, a tablet computer, or a laptop computer, and be collected through biosensors in an embodiment of wearable biosensors, right? Just an example. So a biosensor, this freaking radar is a biosensor. Right here. This radar, smartphone radar, is a biosensor. Google solely, it is a biosensor. Look at radar field on a table, and it's right here. It's the same product. Google solely, radar-based biometric recognition. Radar-based biometric recognition. Microwave radio elements can be three-dimensional in volume. They can create different radar fields. Configured to receive reflections from human tissue in the 3D volume, such as skin, bone, or heart muscle. Able to provide biometric data, 3 dimensions. In 3 dimensions, they can take things such as temperature of a person's arm at multiple points in and around the arm. With radar can take your temperature multiple spaces on your arm, multiple places on your arm. Surface field radar may determine skin temperature, heart rate, or an amount of perspiration on a user's hand. This patent talks about this radar element, Google solely, working in the WiGig range, 57 to 63 gigahertz, which is the standard new form of Wi-Fi, what people commonly call 5G, but it's a misnomer. This is just WiGig frequency, which is an unregulated band. This is the 60 gigahertz Wi-Fi bands right here, 57 to 63 gigahertz. But this patent talks about 1 to 300 gigahertz. This radar, biometric radar, is able to emit 1 to 300 gigahertz in any range, able to receive reflections from the human skin at a particular resolution down to about 2 millimeters, right? It can penetrate clothing while not substantially penetrating human tissue. It can differentiate between human tissue reflections and other things. The antenna elements and signal processor can be configured to differentiate between different types of human tissue, imaging your body. With this radar field, the different types of tissue that can be imaged based on what frequencies they're transmitting at you can include your skin, your muscles, particular types of muscles, meaning a differentiation between skeletal muscles and heart muscles, your bone, your blood, and your cartilage. Radar-based biometric systems also include blood pressure, skin temperature, breathing rate, oxygen or carbon dioxide content of breath, just to name a few. These and other conditions can be determined based on measuring a user's heart movement, quantity of blood in capillaries or veins, example, if the capillaries are full or not full, skin perspiration, bones or cartilage orientations, movement of ribs to understand breathing, chemical content or temperature of air expelled from the user, your breath, temperature of skin on the interior, muscle, or blood. Radar. And this radar patent talks about .400 gigahertz. Where is it? Right here. Same patent, or same patent family. This Google Solely radar talks about a transceiver. This radar field sends and receives from the phone. Therefore, the antennas in the phone are transceivers. They send and receive, can generate radar signals within a range of frequencies between 1 gigahertz and 400 gigahertz. It's the maximum range that I've been able to find with Google Solely. This thing is way outside the general scope of what we understand as, what people understand as 5G. This thing does that and more. Google Solely. Anyway, we're digressing away from this particular patent, where we're looking at this emotional-based AI company, Affectiva, being able to use something like your cell phone to collect biometric information about you and plug it all in through the use of the biosensors that exist on your phone. And what I just got done showing you is radar technology that's available in most modern phones today in one form or another, looking at your biometrics, which then makes that radar sensing technology in something like a mobile device a biosensor that can image your body, understand perspiration, understand temperature, understand respiration, understand heart rate, understand bone, blood, muscle, cartilage, and on and on and on and on and on. And that's not a camera. It's a part of a mobile device that exists, and it can function as a biosensor. A biosensor. Going back to cameras, a mobile device can include a forward-facing camera or a rear-facing camera that can be used to collect mental state data. Facial data can be collected from one or more webcams: a phone camera, a tablet camera, a wearable camera, a room camera. The analyzing of mental state data can be accomplished, at least in part, on a device doing the collecting of the mental state data, which means what? Means that they don't even have to process the information. They can use your device just as a sensor collector, transmit that raw information somewhere else, and then process it off-site in a server, in a cloud. Where are we at? We've got a little bit of time left. Yeah, it talks about this is crazy. They actually line out how AI would use many phones in a room, or a webcam and your TV and your computer and your cell phone all at the same time. Just here, listen to this. As the user is monitored, the user might move due to the nature of the task, boredom, distractions, or for another reason. As the user moves, the user face can be visible from one or more of the multiple sources. Keep in mind the radar fields are also a form of a camera. Okay. Thus, if the user is looking in the first direction, the line of sight from the webcam might be able to observe the individual's face. But if the user is looking in a different direction, the line of sight from the room camera might be able to observe the individual's face. Think airport, think coffee shop, library, place of business. Further, if the user is looking in another direction, the line of sight from a phone camera might be able to observe the individual's face. So you're sitting in a coffee shop and you have your laptop open and your web camera is, you're looking head on and there's a web camera. You look off to your right and somebody is sitting at the table adjacent to you and their cell phone camera's pointed at you. You look off to your left and up in the corner, there's a security camera that the establishment has in order to observe their commercial space. All of these cameras can be tied together in the Internet of Things. And if under surveillance, all of those cameras would be used to collect your information, and would be fused together so that they would be able to manage and monitor and measure your facial expressions in this example, using any and all sensor platforms available. Just because you can't use them doesn't mean that they are not able to be used in groups or as a collection. Talk about being able to network all this stuff together. Basically, if the user's looking in a fifth direction, maybe a wearable camera might be able to observe an individual's face. A wearable device, such as a pair of glasses, can be shown to be either worn by another user or an observer. In another embodiment, wearable devices is a device other than glasses, such as an earpiece with a camera, a helmet or a hat with a camera, a clip-on camera attached to clothing, or any other type of wearable device with a camera or another sensor for collecting mental state data. The individual can also wear a device including a camera, which can be used for gathering contextual information. So you get the idea. This is specifically talking about cameras, but they make the language in the patent open so that all biometric biosensor data can be collected, and this patent applies to the application of all of the biosensor information that's collected. So physiological data can include heart rate variability, blink rate, electrodermal activity, skin temperature, respiration, accelerometer data, and the like. Physiological data can be derived from biosensors. And again, if we go back and look at these patents, man, this patent talks about being able to measure the orientation of the person in the room. They can tell with the radar field. They can tell if you're looking at the phone or you're looking away from the phone. They can tell if you're walking towards the phone or you're walking away from the phone. They can measure your speed as you're walking. They can measure your hand gestures. All the things a camera can do, a radar field can do. It's just doing it with electromagnetic energy that's not in the visible light spectrum. But all of the same information can be inferred, especially when you compare and contrast an individual with a camera and a radar field at the same time, because then you can use one standard to train the other. You can use one sensor to train the other, and they're all available in something like a cell phone. Let's move on. We have 20 minutes left. So, complete and total software package for telemetry, physiological and mental state of an employee or a patient. I kind of read through this earlier. And what this is a Russian patent. It does the same thing. It's looking at sensors, particularly cameras, but other sensors, to remotely evaluate people for their health and for their attentiveness and their cognitive functions and all of it. This stuff is everywhere. It's everywhere. The software is done. It's provided. Google's version of a smart home, we went over this earlier on. I'm not going to go through it in detail. It's in the show notes if you want to look at it. Real-time biometric recording, information analytics, and monitoring systems for behavioral health. This is where this is going. This is where this is going. When people get acclimated to not being around other people, computer systems are going to determine whether or not you're fit for society. Computers will do it. You will be monitored. You will have stimuli injected into your environment so that they can monitor your response to stress. Exposing the subject to a plurality of stimuli during a session, acquiring objective data from a plurality of monitoring sensors where they're measuring physiological parameters. So they're actually injecting stimuli into a session to determine your emotional response. This is probing, standard probing. So let's look at Apple's attention detection. Apple. Detection of a user paying attention to a device may be used to enable or support biometric security, facial recognition, enable features on the device. Image captured by a camera on the device may be used to determine if a user is paying attention to the device. Facial features of a user's face and the images may be assessed to determine if the user is paying attention. May be assessed through the comparison of feature vectors generated. Feature vectors. Oh. Sounds all technical. Let's see. Determine whether a user is paying attention to a device. So it's patented in a way so that you interact with your phone, but your phone interacts with you. It senses you and understands you. You don't have to necessarily pick it up and touch it. It's really what this is about. So they give an example of determining whether a user is paying attention to a device before authenticating a user or enabling access to particular data, things like passwords, personal data, etc. Payment systems, tying this into payment systems to prevent unintentional access. Attention may be determined by capturing an infrared illuminated image of the user of the device with the user's face in the captured image. Facial features of the user's face may be encoded to generate feature vectors in a feature space where the feature vectors define the user's facial features. In the feature space, a set of classifiers may then be used on the feature vectors to determine if the user is paying attention to the device or not. Image sensors, cameras, can be an array of sensors. A sensor array may include, but not limited to, charge-coupled devices, which are cameras, or complementary metal oxide semiconductors, sensor elements to capture infrared images or other non-visible electromagnetic radiation. Fancy for saying antennas, folks. In addition to IR sensors and cameras, you have antennas. Those are the CMOS sensor elements. In some embodiments, cameras include more than one image sensor to capture multiple types of images. For example, cameras may include both IR sensors and red, green, and blue sensors. Notice they're calling them sensors. In certain embodiments, cameras include illuminators for illuminating surfaces of subjects with different types of light detected by image sensors. For example, a camera may include an illuminator for visible light, like a flash illuminator, and or illuminators for infrared light, for example, a flood IR source and a speckle pattern projector. Speckle pattern projector. We're going to spend some time looking at speckle pattern projectors. In some embodiments, the flood IR source and speckle pattern projector, which are the dots on your Face ID, are other wavelengths of light, for example, not infrared. In certain embodiment, illuminations include an array of light sources such as, but not limited to, V-cell, vertical cavity surface emitting lasers. These are what make up the dot projectors in your phone, V-cells. And if you look up V-cells with a company like Lockheed Martin, V-cells are used for all kinds of interesting things. They're used as quantum sensing devices for magnetic fields. They're also used to provide stimulation to nerves in things like cochlear implants. And they do it at power scales that are of less power than what these V-cells can emit from an iPhone. An iPhone, for example, can emit up to a half of a watt, 500 milliwatts. And that's baseline out of these V-cells. And it takes much, much less than that to stimulate nerves. Figure that one out, folks. We're going to look at V-cells in a lot of detail when that information's ready. Still working on it. All right. Image capturing the user's face. An image with the user's face may include a digital image with the user's face shown in the frame of an image. Such an image may include the user's face or a smaller portion within the smaller portion of an image. As long as it's captured with sufficient resolution, they're able to basically ID you and use it as authentication. Check this out. Facial features of the user that may be encoded as feature vectors. This is from Apple. But are not limited to, right? Position of the face in the image, position of the eyes in the image, including position of the eyes relative to the outline of the face, position of the pupils in the image, head pose, position of the device relative to the face, position of the camera relative to the eyes, opening angle of the eyes, the ratio of the eyes width versus eyelid distance, reflection parameters and or active sensor parameters. Reflection parameters may include presence, intensity, and or position of reflections on the surfaces and images, including reflections in the eyes. Reflections in the eyes of the user in the image. Reflections may result from, for example, the device's screen backlight. Active sensor parameters may include the presence, intensity, and or position of active sensor lighting. Active sensor lighting, light from active sensors such as active IR sensors or active red, green, and blue sensors. Do you really think that those Face ID lasers turn off after you get into your phone? Or do you think that they are part of an active sensor array element designed to continually soak information about you and potentially stimulate your nerves, but we're not quite there yet. Not quite. We're getting there. But for all intents and purposes, I'll pose the original question. Do you really think that those V-cell vertical surface cavity emitting lasers that emit up to or more than a half a watt of laser power, do you really think they turn off after you get into your phone? Or do you think they're still on? Do you think they're still being used to measure and monitor the environment, including you? Different groups or people may include people with many different features. So they're looking at the same kind of things. They're able to group and understand based on demographics is really what this is talking about. We got 10 minutes left. They talk about making a distinction between different devices and different camera placements and how that affects image quality and validation of the image, and how that they need to collect as many images as possible for training, what they call training images, used to train attention determination with machine learning, using machine learning and computer systems to take a number of images and use those as training images to set a baseline for when you're paying attention or when you're not. I don't know. To me, man, this stuff is like grossly violating your Fourth Amendment. Your right to privacy. That's what this stuff is really doing. But it's sold as convenient. So, you know, some people are going to be like, you're just paranoid. Well, okay, whatever you say. This one's interesting. This is a hardware component of Apple. I'm going to highlight these one more time. Just this idea of like, this is what they're doing to you. They're projecting energy into the environment, and it's a variety of energy. It's electromagnetic or it's ultrasound typically, right? The electromagnetic can range from radio waves to millimeter waves to infrared to light. And then they can measure the return of the electromagnetic energy in any of those scales, any of those spectrum. They can measure it and understand what's going on with your physiology. This patent is 3D mapping. The other patent that we're not going to cover, I don't want to show you again though, is upper body skeleton extraction. Same general kind of thing. They can understand you in three-dimensional space. So let's dig into this multi-zone imaging sensor lens array, and this will be it for tonight. But I want to show you the sophistication of this stuff. So this thing talks about having pass bands of filter zones, meaning that one device, one single lens, what we would understand as a lens, has different filter zones that include an infrared pass band and at least one visible band, which is red, green, or blue. At least one visible passband may include red, green, or blue passbands. Typically, the filter zones and the respective convex regions are rectangular and share a common aspect ratio, right? So camera terminology. In one embodiment, the filter zones include at least first and second zones of different respective first and second sizes that share common aspect ratios. Objective optics are configured to focus light onto a matrix of the detector elements so as to form respective images of a common field of view on different respective regions of the matrix. Multiple optical filters which have different respective passbands are positioned so that each filter filters the light that is focused onto the different respective ones of the region. So what the hell did I just read? What this is basically saying is that they're able to focus light or electromagnetic energy. They can focus light onto a matrix of the detector elements to form images of a common field, which means they can make many images of the same thing that's being viewed, right? Different parts, different regions of this matrix. And so what this is getting at is they can partition or segment a chip, a CCD chip camera, and have part of it look at red, part of it look at blue, part of it look at green, part of it look at infrared, and create whole images and replicate those images and have them all be looked at individually. And you say, well, isn't that what a camera does already? Kinda. This is done in a whole different way. It allows for what I was getting at earlier, things like three-dimensional mapping, three-dimensional imaging, because the quality of the image is so much better. And here it is. An embodiment of the present invention that is described herein enables both depth and color image data to be captured simultaneously by a single image sensor. And that's the benefit of this. You're taking something that used to be its own clunky box like an Xbox Kinect. The Xbox Kinect sensor is now something that looks like the sleek, sexy form factor on the back of your iPhone. Your iPhone comes with 7 fucking cameras. That's fantastic. Yeah, well, what's it doing? Well, you could take really good photos with it. Oh, cool. Was that all it's doing? Not exactly. It's doing a whole lot more. It's creating an opportunity to capture both depth and color image data in high resolution simultaneously by a single image sensor. More generally, the embodiments of the present invention provide a device and method that may be used to provide a compact, inexpensive solution for multispectral sensing. Multispectral imaging. 2 or more different images, each of different spectral range, so red, green, blue, infrared, right, different spectrums, are formed simultaneously on different regions of the matrix. In the embodiments described below, the spectral ranges comprise infrared and visible light, specifically red, green, blue, and other spectral configurations likewise to be used. Blah, blah, blah. Talk about infrared. Pattern-based three-dimensional mapping systems, we'll get there. That's the V-cell laser stuff. Pattern-based three-dimensional mapping systems generate the desirable, is generally desirable to filter incoming IR radiation with a narrowband filter, which is matched to the wavelength of the pattern projector. The filter zones that are produced by coating a filter layer over the image sensor, however, typically have broad pass bands. So what they can do, so crazy, they can project the light out, and then they can layer with vapor deposit type coatings. They can layer the photoreceptors, and they can create pass bands based on the image, the light that they project out. So they're it's like a one-way mirror is basically what that is. They can project light out, and then when it's received back, it goes through vapor deposited pass bands on the image sensor to filter the light out that they want, to create what they're calling here narrowband IR filter, which is pretty sophisticated stuff when you think about it. Typically, a filter is an interference filter comprising thin film layers on transparent substrate like glass, designed to be transparent to visible radiation while blocking IR radiation outside a narrow band containing a projection wavelength. Thus, the filter narrows the IR passband of a module without affecting any visible passbands. Super sophisticated stuff. It's just cameras. It's just cameras. So with 3 minutes left, where we're going, we didn't read any of the details on some of these extra support patents, but they're really just to illustrate the entire network. We're going to start looking at infrared, and we're going to look at how they can understand biometrics based on infrared measurements, looking at terahertz and sub-terahertz radiation, contactless blood pressure monitoring. We're going to look at the iPhone, Face ID, and we're going to look at pattern illumination. And it's for stuff like this, right? I mean, where this is really going, where we're really going with biometrics is being able to use something like the pattern projector with an iPhone, right, to get you logged into your phone. It maps your veins in your face, and it can look at the different layers underneath your skin, which means it's mapping the muscles, it's mapping the bone, it's mapping the cartilage, it's even potentially mapping the nerves to understand where the nerves are in your face. And once I can illustrate this to you effectively enough, I will show you some documents that discuss very low power nerve stimulation using infrared light. And this is just one of the ways that they can potentially interact with your nervous system and start fucking with your brain. So I hope you all enjoyed. It was a very technically intensive show, but cameras are important. We all know what they are. We have to kind of understand what software can do with the camera before we can start exploring some of these other techniques like projected or light projection systems and how they interface with people, and electromagnetic energy systems, what we understand as antennas, and how they interact with people. Imaging is just one piece. That is just the observe and orient piece of the OODA loop, making a decision and then taking an action with the same systems. Now that is the challenge to explain. And that's where we're going to go as time goes on. But that's all the time we have for tonight. So I will see you all in a few days.